the objective of this paper is to interpret the supremacy of finance before, during, and even after the crisis, despite its responsibility as a cause of crisis. And I will try also to relate neoliberalism, the increase of inequality, and the supremacy of finance. Well, I will begin giving some conceptual clarifications about the definitions of fictitious capital and financial capital, and after I will show why financialization is exactly the development of fictitious capital, and at the end I will relate neoliberalism, development of fictitious capital, and the increase of inequality. As a conclusion, I will give some conceptual political considerations. Well, merchant's capital is capital which operates in the circulation of commodities and money, and it can be divided in commercial capital and money dealing capital. Commercial capital is specialized in the trade of commodities, and money dealing capital is specialized in the trade of money. So financial capital is exactly what we call money dealing capital. This is not a consensual term. Financial capital is divided in interest-bearing capital, that is money loaned to productive capitalists or to industrial capitalists. It buys labor force and means of production to produce value or to produce income. And fictitious capital does not buy labor force, does not buy means of production, and so it is a value that does not produce other values. In this case, we lose all connections with productive capital or real production. So it is completely different of the concept of Hilferding of finance capital, because for Hilferding it was the fusion of bank capital with industrial capital, but in this type of definition we do not have space to include fictitious capital. It was interesting to analyze Germany's in Hilferding's time, but it is not adequate to explain our crisis that began in 2008. Well, being a case of increase of value without relations to creation of new value, the development of fictitious capital means that finance growth without new production, and this is exactly what financialization means. Consequently, we have that the prices of fictitious capitals can depend only on supplies and demands, without relation with cost of production or with labor of means of productions bought. And the value of fictitious capital is so merely speculative. The development of fictitious capital implies only distribution of value and income created, already created, because it does not create. Or what we see in this type of definition is we have to explain how its value growth and what is the relation with neoliberalization and with financialization. With neoliberal globalization, a lot of credit markets, several credit markets all over the world were closely linked, and this increased a lot the money to be placed internationally. So a lot of money to be placed internationally explains the development of fictitious capital in a high proportion and for so long. This is the first relations between neoliberalism and the increase or the development of fictitious capital. But we have another way of seeing this type of relation. Being a case of value without relations with production of value, it is a mere speculative value, and neoliberalism increased the possibilities of speculations. How is that? First, the free competition led to the seek for quick profits, and speculative profits are quick profits. Flexible exchange rates, together with the free movement of capital, is an explosive mixture that lead to a great size of fluctuations, and this is speculative opportunity. The increase of value of stocks is, during all the neoliberalism, a criteria of success. It is why the CEOs are paid with stocks, acquired the stocks to increase its value as a way of obtaining success. Privatization of public funds is another way of seeing the growth of speculations. We know that pension funds have a long-term objective, but to attract clients, they have to show results now or in short term. So even pension funds used to place their money in speculative assets. And the general deregulations gave rise to that, to a lot of risk. It happened a lack of income to sustain the demand that was responsible for the increase of value of fictitious assets. So this lack of demand reduced the gains, and this reduction of gains stimulated the massive sales that give rise to the crisis. The other consequence is inequality. Why is that? Neoliberalism intensifies competition, and intensifying competition with the use of technological progress. We know that technological progress is very expensive, and this concentrated the gains in fewer means, with concentrations in centralization of capital all over the world. Another way to see the inequality is to think about the idea of mere distribution of resources already created instead of creating new value. This permits an inequality higher. What the world do to exit the crisis? The main policy is injection of liquidity that we call quantitative easing. As suggested by Minsky, this is a way of exit of crisis because it prevents that a liquidity crisis be transformed, turn a general insolvency crisis. The problem is that, and this was the solutions to the 1977, 82 and 86 crisis, and even at the beginning of 2008 crisis, this was interesting. The problem is now we have a lot of liquidity, and the problem is not a lack of liquidity, but how to direct this liquidity to investment. This is the main problem to exit the crisis. Keynes talked at his time in liquidity trap. We live in a liquidity trap. It means that the uncertainty is so high that investors do not decide to invest and retain money. Even Marx talked about an absolute preference for money during the crisis. The other type of measures are austerities policies that are very sustained by neoliberal thinkers, but it's not adequate. Why neoliberal thought sustain this type of policy? The idea is that government and discretions coming from government is seen as inefficient and even nuisible. And they think we have to reduce the role of government to give to market the role of regulation, because market is seen as the best regulator. The problem is all the austerities policies benefit especially financial sphere, so we have the maintenance of the supremacy of finance. Second, punish real production with reduction of demand and investment, and increase inequality. It's absolutely necessary to have fiscal policies that are not sustained by neoliberal thought, because it means a higher power of government to intervene. So, why it's absolutely necessary to have fiscal policy? In an environment, in a pessimistic environment, we do not have the decision of investment. We do not have the decision of investment because the decision depends on the profitability expected by investors have to be superior, higher than the interest rates. So if we inject liquidity, if we reduce the interest rates, but the expectative of profitability is also reduced, the decision of investment is not taken. In this case, it's absolutely necessary that government invest itself to create employment, to create income, and to change the environment from a pessimistic environment to an optimistic environment. If in this case we have to have a discretionary role of the government to choose where to invest and to choose the objective of increased employment investing. We will end saying that we have to fight against neoliberalism and in the defense of fiscal policy. Against neoliberalism because it produces inequality and it produces makes more difficult to exit the crisis. So against austerities policies and in favor of discretionary policies. Thank you very much.